Spring has finally sprung and summer is just around the corner. With the warmer weather, many are hitting the road and accidents still happen. I'm joined with Craig and Ryan Swapp of Craig Swapp and Associates in the sponsored segment for more. And thank you, gentlemen, for being here and for coming back to GTU. Let's talk about our cars for a moment and how we can get our springtime seasonal checkups on our cars. How do we do that first?
Well, you know, we're not auto mechanics, but what we've seen from our experience, we're in the business of helping people, and we see too many tragic accidents from people that don't maintain their cars properly. And probably the biggest offender that I see is tires. So if you let your tires get bald, it rains, accidents happen. And if you have passengers in your car, it could be really tragic and sad. And so what we try to do is just encourage everyone that we talk to look at their cars, their tires, their windshield wipers, you know, everything about their cars. Just make sure that it's safe for those they carry.
And that's so important. Once we look under the hood, we do all the checks, we do the tires, and hand in hand, the brakes go into play. And so we got to make sure, when you're talking about wet weather, we had snow yesterday, still in spring, in May. What about those brakes, Ryan?
Yeah, you know, one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that if your car is in disrepair and that is the cause of an accident, you are generally responsible for that. So we just recommend that folks go to a body shop that they trust and get their car checked out on a regular basis and make sure it's in good working order so that they're not responsible for an accident that happens because of lack of maintenance.
Well, Ryan, I was also just telling you that I was reviewing my insurance policy on my car. That's another factor that we have to consider.
It is. One of the biggest roadblocks that we run into in our practice is that we'll get folks that call us that are very seriously injured, and there's not enough insurance to cover all of their medical bills or to cover their property damage. The minimum coverage in Utah is $25,000, and with inflation and the rise of the cost of cars and used cars, oftentimes $25,000 isn't even enough to replace your vehicle. And so we recommend that folks have at a minimum $100,000 in coverage on their auto policies. And that's a kind of a minimal number that hopefully that'll cover things, but certainly get as much as folks can afford. And then the other important thing that we want to point out is that you can't always protect yourself. You can't always count on the person who causes the accident having enough insurance. And so you want to make sure that you're covered yourself. And the way that you do that is through uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage. It's a really simple thing that you can add to your policy. It doesn't cost very much, a few bucks extra a month. And you can make sure that, if the person that causes the accident doesn't have any insurance or doesn't have enough, at least you have protected yourself and those in your vehicle in that instance.
Gosh, this is such great insight to make sure that we're reviewing all of our policies. Craig, let's also talk about what other coverage that we have to think about and families need to make sure that you're completely insured.
Well, I think you got to think about whatever you have to lose, you know what I mean? And if you've got property or whatever, you just need to make sure you have insurance to cover that in the event of a bad thing. One of the things we often see is people that only insure their cars. They call it liability-only coverage. So an accident happens, well, there's no coverage to replace their car. And a lot of people are out. I mean, it's hard to be without a vehicle.
So many things can fall through the cracks, can't they?
Right.
Okay, let's also talk about the process of reviewing and updating your insurance policies. A lot of times we just say, oh, I've got insurance, and I don't even know the first place to look. Where should we be looking?
Yeah, so the best place to start is to talk to most people buy their policies through an agent or a broker. And so, we recommend that folks reach out to that person and get a copy of their policy. Look through it. The best place to look is the declarations page on your policy. That's going to show you what all your coverages are. And just go through, look, it's usually a one-page thing. Look through, see what you have. And if there's any of these things missing, like uninsured motorist coverage or your limits are too low, talk to your agent and get those bumped up.
Ryan and Craig, sometimes it's the wording, it's the verbiage to ask for, the declaration page, the underinsured, overinsured, all of those topics that we need to look through and make sure our car is in tip-top shape and we all have our policies reviewed. Thank you so much for that information.
You're very welcome.
And thanks again to Craig Swapp and Associates for sponsoring this segment.